Good afternoon. This is Ted Warner with the Texas Library Association, welcoming you to today's webinar. This is the last webinar in our grant series from the Texas Library Association, at least for the spring. We'll be having more coming up in the fall of 2013. This is the Grants Management webinar after the award letter arrives with Laura Browning. Just a few tips before we start. I do recommend closing other applications, particularly if your bandwidth is limited, and that will help us avoid lag and make sure the signal comes through smoothly. But if you do experience any problems, be sure to chat to me in the chat box in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. And of course, always feel free to send comments and questions there. Continuing education credit will be available tomorrow at our CE website, www.txla.org/CE, under the CE Registration and Credit Certificates button in the left-hand menu. That's also where you registered for today's webinar. And that page is also where you will find a recording of this session and all of the other programs in the grant webinar series. We will also email a link to the recording to all of you who have registered for today. Our presenter today is Laura Browning, who understands the many dimensions of sustaining leadership, from being a member of a grassroots organization to serving on boards of national organizations, and she has spoken in Barcelona and Melbourne. She is a frequent speaker, trainer, and blogger on many topics. She's a native of Ohio, but grew up in southern Louisiana. She received her master's in education with additional work in nonprofit leadership and technology from Nicholls State University, the Universities of Louisiana, Lafayette, Monroe, and New Orleans. Her nonprofit experience includes time as a volunteer, board member, development director, and executive director in diverse fields such as domestic violence, drug and alcohol abuse within the community, faith-based and student leadership organizations, but she is also a former capacity building director for the Louisiana Association of Nonprofit Organizations, LANO, the Louisiana equivalent of Artano, in New Orleans. And in all these roles, partnerships and voices have taught her knowledge and give her the experience to communicate the partnerships and voices on larger platforms. We are very honored to have Laura with us today. Welcome, Laura. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. This is a real pleasure to be the culminating speaker on the series on grants for the Texas Library Association. My mother always allowed me in libraries as long as I could reach a book, and the librarian was always under orders to let me read whatever I could reach. And apparently I had a great reach because I read and read and read and still read every day. You probably can see the books behind me. I have quite a collection. I just finished Dan Brown's new book, which was very interesting. What we're going to talk about today is you've gotten the letter and you've taken a deep breath and you now say, what do I do? And you probably should have said that when you did the application, assuming that you would win it, but it's okay too. What we're going to do today is to talk about several different areas in maintaining grants and getting to the next one. As you notice, the lead on the webinar said winning the next one is the last piece. When you close one out, you are beginning the next one every time. Foundations, grantors, funders operate in their own universe, and they speak to each other. And sometimes you may have had a problem with one, and it gets communicated to the next in a confidential manner. And you begin to wonder why you simply cannot win grants. That may be the under conversation you never know about. So doing grants management is absolutely essential and absolutely one of the things that you have to focus on the most, not only because of some of the legal ramifications, but because of some of the communication ramifications between funders. We're going to talk today about what the IRS expects of you, building some files, and actually managing some of them. And please note at the bottom of the introduction to each section, I have a piece that says not intended as legal advice. I'm very cautious about anyone who offers you free legal advice. It's exactly worth what you're getting, what you're paying for it. I know organizations who have ended up having to pay back hundreds of thousands of dollars in grants because of mismanagement, and perhaps not mismanagement of current staff, but previous staff. The quickest way to ruin your reputation and to ruin the reputations of all nonprofits around you is to make a mistake with grants management. Grants management is how you begin to win the next piece. Let's see if we get that to work. There we go. IRS, in their documents, say you must keep your records as long as they are needed for the administration of any provision of the IRS code. Now that is kind of frightening to me a little bit, that they would expect you literally to keep every record as it relates to the document. And what the expectation is that you maintain continuity in the documents, you maintain a system of operations that allows you to retrieve them when you need them, and that you are aware of the aging of different types of documents and what you have to keep for what periods of time. And that's one of the pieces we're going to talk about today, is putting that kind of system in place. When you build a system, you should build it according to the life cycle of the grant. Its beginning, its operation or disposition, and then knowing how long records must be retained. One of the slides you'll see later in the presentation is a chart of recommended keep dates. Some of them are 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, some of them permanent, and some of them ephemeral and can be destroyed almost immediately. But we're going to talk about what you have to do to create this system and build this system. I'm notorious or well known for creating systems for grants management and embedding them in organizations and making sure that people can use them and keep themselves safe without keeping every single piece of paper in an organization. You're going to hear me continually refer to it as document management, along the lines of project management and construction. It is not retention. You simply cannot keep every document that relates to everything in a grant. Envelopes, you can't keep, there's no use in keeping those things. But there should be a system where you can record them safely. You have the generally acceptable accounting policies in place that has multiple handlers on documents. All of these things will enter into your document management. And when the IRS comes to visit about a grant, and none of us ever want that to happen, they will want to see the email files and the e-trails on all of the pieces as well, whether it was online applications, emails between staff about the document, emails between you and a manager on the funds. They will want to see all of that. So I don't want to frighten you today, but I want you to be very smart, and when you're very smart, you win more grants. Things that you have to consider when you're doing document management is also the continuity of operations and historical references. I'm going to talk a little bit about continuity of operations and what I laughingly call a grab and go file. Many of us live in areas that are impacted by environmental issues, just like San Antonio is drying out a bit. There has to be a way that you literally can have a file, whether it's a portable hard drive, and grab it and get out sometimes. I had a friend who had a nonprofit, and unfortunately they had a massive fire, and they were in the building when the fire started, and she had her files on a portable hard drive in her desk, and she backed it up on a regular schedule, and she was able to maintain the financial integrity of the organization and the operations because she literally grabbed and left with that single small portable hard drive. So we'll talk about that as well. And when we talk about management of documents, I am very involved in historical issues. And I always want us to have traditions. I always want us to know who we are, how we got there, and why we did what we did. So you have to maintain some kind of historical integrity about your organization so that you're not constantly doing the movie Groundhog Day and just repeating everything over when there's a new executive director. One of the pieces that you will see those of us who do document management talk about are plans for things. The sunrise, sunset labels on pieces, color coding files, labeling files with electronic continuity and paper continuity. But the key to that always is, as the military says, no battle plan survives contact with the enemy. No plan for document management will ever survive being awarded a grant. It just won't happen. One of the things I ask you to do today is to put a sticky note on your computer screen or on your desk that says, I must clean up this file today. And every day, touch some file, either electronically or paper, to get it in order. So that when it comes time to close this, it's ready to close. When it comes time to make an application for another grant that might be related to the one that you're doing now, you will have what you need in front of you, and you will not be having that mad race to find one piece of paper. The last note in the bottom says, if I do nothing else tomorrow, I'm going to clean up the blank folder, program folder, staff folder. So many things we allow to remain undone because we're busy administering a grant that when it becomes essential to close out on it, we're scrambling. Well, where is this? Oh, I have to go back and recreate that agenda. I have to go back and find that sign-in sheet. If you do every day a little bit housekeeping on it, and I know that probably sounds like your mother, it'll make it so much easier when you get to the end of it. And literally, I'm notorious for having sticky notes, attached to the top of my system here that say things, I need to get this folder done. I like building segmented files for a grant. A lot of times you'll see attorneys that use the red board folders or the green board folders, they call them, where you have a 2-hole clip at the top. And I use them to segment everything about a grant, from the pre-award, which means the actual application, when the grant was submitted, a postmark on it, when it was tracked and received, so that I have everything on the front of that folder. Usually they're in 3 or 4 parts. My first part is always going to be the actual application, and then the time frame when it was sent, when I expect it to return, and who my contact is on that. My pre-award piece always is a wrap-up of everything that got me to the point of building the folder. Post-award component is the operations side of the folder. And in the operations side of the folder, you will literally need to have everything that points to where things are in other files. We simply cannot keep everything in one folder. That's not realistic nor logistical. But it is your pointer place. And again, all in one red folder. We can literally pull up and take out one folder that says, this is the one for Brown Foundation. This is the grant for the federal government. You will have to build these kind of folders just for your own sanity sometimes, so that you can pick it up when somebody calls and says, what are you going to do about this? I need to have information on that piece. The next piece that we always build in the components in the system is an after grant file. And the after grant file says things like anecdotes from clients, press clippings about it, the lessons learned, because I always encourage folks to sit down and do a closeout on it and say, what did we do well? What did we do poorly? What do we need to take from this one to the next one? What did we learn? An after grant system is where you leave your map for where things are stored and for when their sunrise, sunset dates are. The last component is a recovery system. We all know things go wrong. I usually laugh and say we have to be careful about the bread truck hitting us if we're the only person on the team that handles a grant. But then I have to explain bread trucks to some folks. What that means is you cannot be the only person to know everything about a grant. It is just dangerous at this time. Internet goes down, postal services lose documents, you lose the hard drive. Your recovery system has enough to point you at where the backups are for everything. And I don't recommend, backing up your files every night. That's something you have to look at within your own organization to see what is compatible for you. Many times our organizations are small organizations, or 1 or 2 man shops, or 1 or 2 people just on a project. But the recovery system will help you know when something goes wrong, where do I go to get what? I love my Post-it note hanging file labels. When I build that grant system, I sort the folders that are still, all of them are made up the same way you saw, pre-award, post-award, just as you saw. Then in the file drawer, they are sorted by a blue hanging folder that says pending. This means its application is out there and I have a hoped for date on it. Then when they come out of that system, whether they're funded or declined, the file folder label on the top changes to either funded, and all the funded grants go together in a file, or declined, and when I have a decline, I always want to know what my reapply date is and where do I have to make a reapplication. If I've been able to find out some of the assessment on it or some of the evaluation on it, it goes into the decline file as well. This becomes a great track for anybody coming in doing development, anybody coming in doing grant applications. You will have so many pieces and parts in one single place for one grant that even when you want to do historical references on it, you'll have things together. Many times we do applications that are just online completions now. And again, that's a great effort to save paper, to save time, save costs. But we don't always do really good captures of what we're submitting online. One of the things I do professionally is I'm a grant reviewer for 5 different agencies of the federal government, several dozen foundations in the United States, several different individuals who do awards, some corporations that do awards, and many of them, you can't guarantee what they see of your application unless you have done some capture on it before it goes to them. The quickest way to lose a grant is to have your application go in and be scrambled, or have your application go in and not meet the parameters for size on the page. I always recommend that you find some way of capturing it, whether it is by screen snaps, the button at the top of your keyboard that says PRTSC, or using an Adobe system called Qt PDF Writer, which will literally print to a PDF file and allow you to keep whatever you would normally print off on paper. And it is a free piece. And then another one that is also a free one is called Ghostwriter. And this allows you to capture the pieces that would normally be sent as an online submission. This gives you the document you need. You never want to sit with a reviewer or sit with somebody who's your grants manager and say, can you give me a copy of that grant? I submitted it and I really don't have it and I don't remember what it said. That's not how you win the next one. You'll also be expected to preserve emails and text messages. So many of us don't use the filing systems that are part of our emails, whether they're Outlook or Gmail, but learn to develop your folders on the side where you transfer an email immediately over to that spot as soon as you read it and respond to it, or read it and handle it. I even color code my label files on my computers for different pieces. Like you saw, the pending was one color, the funded is another color, declined is another. My electronic systems in my computers are as color coded and icon marked as the paper are in front of me. And somebody's going to inevitably say, my God, she's a little OCD. Yeah, probably. But I also manage a $675,000 grant with 350 clients under it for 2 years with Llano, as you heard me mention earlier. And I had to be able to maintain records on the number of hours, trainings, travel for all of those clients alone, for the most part. And they decided to do a program audit and a financial audit. And with the program audit, they walked in and said, I'd like to see one of your client files out of 350. And so I literally pulled one out, handed it to them, and it was pretty much just like you see, color coded and documented and everything, cross-referenced. And they said, can we see your electronic files? And opened up the electronic file, and it matched exactly with the colors, the sequencing, the order, everything. And that was it. They only looked at one file because everything was so perfectly matched to each other. Some of the other people who had matching funds that I did as part of a group, literally they went through every file they had, every document, every receipt, every letter, because it was not coordinated. It was not pulled together so tightly. I know it sounds a little frustrating that you really just want to use the grant, use the money, and get working. But if you're going to win the next one, you've got to put some things in place before it ever starts, and some ways of looking at it in a systemized method. One of the pieces that's so important is dealing with your policies in your organization. I'm going to mention Sarbanes-Oxley just for a few minutes. It's kind of an old piece, and so many of us know about it, that we've forgotten what the intent was on it. We're going to talk about developing document schedules, and some good places I'll point you at some charts where you can develop your own system. And then we're going to talk about event triggers and how you build what you're going to do when, even if it's 5 years from now and you're not even on that side of the planet anymore. One of the things that all organizations must do as a result of Sarbanes-Oxley is to adopt and implement a whistleblower policy. If you have not put one together in your organization and you don't sign off on it every year, the IRS, if you are audited, can cite you for non-compliance on those issues. A whistleblower policy protects all employees, and it allows you to raise questions safely if there is something not going exactly as you would like it to. Nobody wants to be the organization that has the 6-inch headline that says nonprofit steals money, because people are not going to discriminate between you and the next nonprofit. You should also adopt and implement a document retention policy that says how documents will be destroyed. Electronic documents, whether they're tape backups or flash drives or CDs or DVDs, must either be burned or destroyed by a technical method. They can't just be tossed in a garbage and broken up. There are a lot of pieces. Again, I don't want anyone to ever have an IRS audit, or I don't ever want anyone to be sued. But these are the kind of things that will literally happen when they start coming in to visit. The Sarbanes-Oxley piece makes it a crime to cover up documents and intentionally destroy documents. This piece came about as a result of the Enron scandal many years ago, but there was a single line or two in there that included nonprofits in the piece. And if you get a subpoena, you have literally 5 days, working days, to present every piece of information they want on a specific subject. And you can't say at that point, oh, I need to get a document policy in place. It's too late. So I always suggest that everyone begin to look at it. Many organizations are using now commercial shredders or commercial document destroyers to help protect their integrity as organizations and make sure their information is not going astray. Particularly if you work with a healthcare organization or you deal with individuals' personal information, it becomes essential that you can properly dispose of the information and make sure that personal information does not fall into the wrong hands. One of the great places to look for a policy, a model policy, is, as you see on the top, blueavocado.org. They're one of the great resources on the web for nonprofits. This is their article from 2009. It's a little dated at this point, but the content is still very important. You note that they say, please think of this as document management rather than document retention. You probably don't have enough space, you don't have enough files, you don't have enough cardboard boxes to hold on to every document. So by developing a document retention policy, you will be able to manage them more efficiently and maintain what needs to be maintained.
Laura,
Yeah.
this is Ted. We have a couple folks who are experiencing some technical problems. I'm going to go ahead and kill the video feed
Sure. That's not a problem.
to preserve bandwidth, and that will, hopefully that will help out a little bit. Thanks.
And they'll let us know if it doesn't. All right, thank you guys. Thank y'all for using the chat boxes. That's the best way Ted and I can deal with some problems. And I noted that we had some video stopping and we had some audio drops. So if those of you who had those problems will chat back in and let us know that you're back, we'll be good. Things that you need to do when you talk about document retention is to make sure there are some documents that you always save. For legal sake, for community sake, for historical sake, that go beyond legal guidelines. And then remember that all emails must conform to the same guidelines. You may want to make sure that, as many organizations do, you have the signature line at the bottom that states clearly that this is organizational information, and it has the tag on it that says that this is intended for the specific purpose. Please remind employees that the computers that they work on in your office are not their personal computers, and that they are company computers. And if you are audited, if you are sued, if there is a funder who raises a question about your financial integrity, all of those cute little emails that they have sent back and forth and they've been searching for odd things will come up as part of the search. And you really don't want to do that either. And I know that we tend to forget that they're not our computers sometimes, but if you end up in an audit or in an IRS audit or a program audit or a financial audit and there's a question about funding, all of those trails will come across. One of the pieces that we have available is a document schedule, and you have a sample of it on the screen, and Ted is going to have a copy of it to provide to you if you want it. And it literally says what the item is, what the pieces are, and what format they're in, where they're stored, have they been completed, received, are they due, and what the retention or the sunset date is on them. You'll see this is a master list of what a file looks like when I build it. This is literally a sheet that's on the very first page of the red tag folder. It says grant documents, original as submitted, funders letters, all the way down to evaluation, documents, programs, media, in-kind support records, to the board, a list of the board members, their addresses, their contacts, the board policy on terms. Many funders will want to know, do you have term limits on board members? They'll also sometimes want to know what your board's policy is on give or get off, which is an ugly thing sometimes. Also, on that front page of that folder, I have all of the important thing about the EIN number, DUNS number, CCR number. Any of the numbers that might apply to me with a grant are also at least tagged in the folder that I know where to find them. Have they been submitted, or do I know where they are? Staff members, full-time, temporary, part-time. You'll see the line that says staff resumes. Many applications ask you for a resume for employees, and it should not be the resume they use to be hired, but it should be a templated resume that states what their job responsibility is as of this grant or application or fund request. One of the great things that you should always maintain is who your collaborators are, who you have had been in coalitions with, who you've worked with in teams. Many times grants are strengthened simply by being able to document who your partners have been in other similar grants. And if you build these checklists on the front of every file, you're going to know who you were with on this, what you did together, and be able to pull it and use it for the next application. Some of the other pieces that we have used at times is literally points of contact for this specific grant, and that would be down on the line that says other, because points of contact change constantly, and I always want to have more than one point of contact for a grant, not just the grant manager at the organization, but another person I can always go back to and say help. You notice at the top it says the date the file was opened and who it was opened by. I like to make sure when I do grant management I have a full trail if I don't go into work the next morning and somebody has to pick it up. That is always a scary thought for all of us. You see the yes and no on the side, that simply indicates yes, this is included, no, this isn't included, and then we'll come to the retention date in just a moment. From the Center for Community-Based Nonprofit Organizations in Austin, they put together, based on Sarbanes-Oxley, a document destruction map based on 2004. You'll see the minimum requirements for many of the pieces. I suggest you do some research, talk to your financial wizards, and ask their suggestions on how long they think what pieces have to remain. This is driven, again, by Sarbanes-Oxley and IRS saying that you must maintain every document as it applies to the grant for the life of the project. But you'll see some things in here, for example, where it says general correspondence, 2 years. Duplicate deposit slips, 2 years. And many of us have these boxes and piles of banking statements that sometimes are 5, 6, 7, 10, 15 years old. I know I worked in doing a cleanup for an organization that was 20 plus years old, and we went through so many broken cardboard boxes trying just to sort through all the envelopes that had the canceled checks in them or had the bank statements in them, that it was overwhelming. Having spent 4.5 years in New Orleans post-Katrina working with nonprofits, I will tell you there's no more devastating feeling than to see melted paper when you know that you're going to need it again. Many times I will recommend for the things that must be kept permanently is to digitize them as well and to create an electronic file as well as a paper file. If you put them in your grab and go files, you know you will always have them in a safe, containable place, and you don't have to worry about paper melting or burning or mildewing or any of those things. Notice it also says down near the bottom, and you can see the article later on when in your own research, the minute books, bylaws, and charter of your organization. This is a piece that must be kept permanently for your organization. I had the opportunity several years ago to serve in an organization that taped its meetings. And if you are taping a meeting, you must maintain the tapes, the notes, and the minutes as part of the minute book. We entered into a contract. Contract went bad. Sold something, and they didn't make money when they bought it, and they came back and they sued us. And in court, we won in the first round. They went to appellate court, and the first thing out of their attorney's mouth was, we understand they taped their meetings. And the judge said, produce the tapes. The award was overturned, and our damages were over $500,000. But we had great insurance. It's the other thing I always tell everybody as part of grant management. Please make sure you have great officers and directors insurance to protect everyone, as well as liability insurances and those things. Please notice on the file that you're going to see a real weird mix of 2 years, 3 years, 7 years. Some of the recommendations are even for 5 years. But this is part of what you put together as a policy. This is part of what the board accepts as their responsibility. While I know quite well it is the staff's responsibility to put legs under things, it is the board's fiduciary responsibility to live this. And if there is fault to be found, it is found not only with a staff member, but with board members as well. So they need to own that issue. When you're building triggers, and again, I like using a lot of my electronics, and I will set reminders for an organization and show them how to set them 4, 5, 7 years and 2 years in advance that says June 30th, discard check registers from the fiscal year 2006. This makes sure that your CPA, your financial manager, your board, all are aware of what must be done when some staff members may not be there that long. When you're using digital formats, you're using cloud services, you still have to make sure that some of those documents come out of that at their sunsets. You don't have to keep everything, but you have to make decisions on how this is done. When you do triggers, I like to set up a trigger team so there's a good discussion about what must be kept for historical purposes, what must be kept for collaboration purposes, and what has to be maintained for legal purposes. And a trigger team literally sets the calendar every year, every quarter, however your organization wants to put this together, to say, on this date, this is destroyed, and makes a firm commitment to moving paper on. That, or you can just drown under piles of paper and struggle with an absolute ripple effect. You notice in the circles, it's kind of like the rocks in the pond. So many things touch so much. Sometimes we just want to be ostriches and put our head in the sand and say, I'm not getting rid of anything. That's going to be somebody else's job, and I don't want to be bothered with it. That's very dangerous, because that person may not be there, or you may leave, and your organization is going to be the one who's crippled. Again, you notice I put in the circles the ripple effect of historical significance. So many of my organizations don't celebrate milestones, don't celebrate traditions, and it's because sometimes it's so lost in our paperwork and in our documents that we forget that we ever did some wonderful and amazing things, and we need to take a step back sometimes and literally celebrate those things. As the guy under the flag, with the flag, says, we can just keep everything, which becomes completely overwhelming, and is really a disaster waiting for a new person to handle, because somebody coming in may not have your historical significance, may not have your legacy with an organization, and start destroying things and discarding things that you literally would turn around and have a very difficult time replicating. One of the organizations that I did development work for had received a White House award and couldn't find it. Couldn't find the video of it, couldn't find the letters that were signed by Laura Bush, could not find anything. And it was one of the reasons we literally simply just took everything apart over about 6 months until we found the pieces and the parts, and then we could celebrate it and put the pieces up. They had the award, but they had nothing else to go with it because they'd changed staff so many times and the pieces had gotten lost. And that's just so frightening for me not to know, my traditions and celebrate those things. When you get ready to talk about winning the next one, and that's always my case. As soon as I close one, I'm up and working on another one for somebody, or I'm up and encouraging somebody to start researching another one and having the pieces in place. Progress reporting is one of those essential things that you cannot wait to do when you're ready to do the evaluation on your document. In your application, you have probably told someone, this is how I'm going to evaluate this. Many times when I do federal grant evaluations, we will look for the thoroughness of the evaluation system, and not just that they've hired an external evaluator, but how they will monitor the progress internally at the same time. So we're going to talk about how do you use that to win the next piece. We're going to talk for a few minutes here about audits and different kinds of audits, and oh my God, I can't afford an audit. And then we're going to finish up talking about continuity of operations. When you start making your grant live, make sure that you have a style sheet, a fact sheet, some carry along that stays with the people who are managing it, so that they will always have at the forefront the goals, the objectives, and who they need to touch base with to make sure they collect information that goes back to the achievements and completions of those pieces. I always like to make sure when I'm doing the progress reporting and working with folks on developing a system, is they know that they have to have more than one method of evaluation. We all worn out Likert scales and gone 1 to 5, 5 to 1, and 1 star, 3 star, 5 star. But good evaluation is much more in depth than that, and it requires so much more to get to the next grant. Make sure that whoever is touching the grant knows they should always be collecting some kind of information about it. It may be a random comment by somebody that said, "Oh, I'm so grateful y'all did that story hour. My child now wants to read all of that author's books." We'll stop, get the person's name, get the address, get the grant that it's under, and get it tagged and get it in that folder. Because that becomes an anecdotal comment that is so valuable because it was spontaneous and it was not you collecting data as an auditor or as an evaluator to say, how did you like this program? The spontaneous comments are wonderful. The other piece that I always recommend is that you keep releases in that folder so that if you have the opportunity to speak to someone or you have the opportunity to take pictures of an event, you already have the capture to do use of the pictures, particularly of children. I always like to make sure that parents have signed off on a photographic release or a release for their statement so that this is all captured at the same time and you're not going backwards after and going, oh gosh, who was that kid that had that really cool comment at the workshop? I know this sounds a little overwhelming, but once you get in the habit of building these systems and making these systems live, it moves as part of the operations every day. When you do interviews with folks or you do conversations about it, you should be able to do the Gantt chart and see where you are in achievement on certain objectives and goals. You don't want to get to the end of it and say, oh Lord, we said we were going to have 423 people at summer reading programs. How many did we have? And this is October. Make sure that you always know where you are on Gantt charts and posting them. And again, this becomes to look a lot more like construction and project management, but that it is in a sense because it's grant management. And if you're going to win the next one, you've got to have all of these details ready to go because you never know when you're going to get the letter that says the Toyota Foundation has a family literacy grant that's going to be due on June 24th, which is actually real, and you need to have this kind of information in it. Make sure that you monitor the environmental conditions of a grant. Did a building close? Did someone leave the program? All these things are going to come down to being essential when you are wrapping the grant and you go, oh wait, what happened to that person? So many times we've been in those situations, and I have too. That's why I've learned to do these things the hard way sometimes. When you're doing your progress reporting, your evaluations, sometimes you have wonderful surprises, and these are the kind of things that funders and foundations love to know. It was an unanticipated gift. It was an unanticipated response to the project, and this makes them sit up and go, wow, they really did a great job on this. When you're building the systems, make sure that you're capturing this. Make sure that you understand sustainability. Frequently, we have lines in our grants that say now, the funds are available for 2 years, 3 years. What are your plans to continue the program without our funding? By putting together notes on sustainability and what you think it'll take to keep it going past the grant, but when you write the closeout, you will have the information you're looking for and you'll have the way to say, this is how we're going to sustain this. This is what we've learned. Having worked with FEMA in long-term community recovery, we did a lot of work with lessons learned where we were. And what do we do next time? And what do we do better? What did we do not so well? Make sure that when you're doing your grant management, it doesn't become just a counting mechanism or just an hour mechanism or a distribution mechanism, but you have lessons learned in there because that encourages a funder to say, oh, they've learned something. Well, let me see, maybe I'll give them some additional funds to go find if that works. Or the funder may be able to say, I'm not going to be funding this anymore, but the guy I play tennis with is going to be interested in it. Don't ever discount those kind of things happen with your documents when you do closeout reporting, because literally you're putting them in the hands of someone that you trust, and you assume that's the last place they're going to be. Well, bad grants and bad closeouts last forever, and funders will talk about them. Reviewers will get wind of them, and then every piece they read about you for the rest of time, they will go, aren't they the ones who, and you don't want that tag on you either. One of the words that we're so afraid of is nonprofit folks, and people who receive grants under any one of the 29 501c categories is audit. And all an audit is a good thing as far as I'm concerned. It determines whether or not you've done what you said you were going to do. A financial audit will walk against the generally accepted accounting principles. A program audit is a little different. They'll look at best practices. They'll look at what the funder's design was for the project and how well you carried out your plan for it. We always need to remember that we're stewards of the money. It is not a gift. We are charged legally and contractually with using the money in the method we said we were going to do. And if they don't like what we did with it, they have the right to say, no, I'm sorry, it didn't work out. I'd like my money back. And it's really difficult to unpay staff and withdraw projects if you have not met their appraisal for compliance. When you work in the federal grant system, you're going to be papered with assurance letters, compliance letters, a lot of those pieces, but I still know far too many organizations who simply said, I'm not going to worry about it, I'm just going to go do good. And that's dangerous. Financial audits come in a couple different kinds as well. It's not just the massive audit that you pay several $1,000s for, but there's some other ways to deal cost also in audits. And many times if you can have a good relationship with your funder, they will help you get to the point where an audit, a full audit, is a good thing for you to be able to afford. But many times they want to see you succeed, they want to see their money make impact, and they'll work with you on types of financial reporting that helps them understand that the money was used wisely and safely. You heard me mention earlier about a document or a program audit, and this is literally where they walk in and want to see files, and they want to see if you did physically the things you reported that you did. When you sign your contracts with funders, notice in the contract language if they have the right to do what types of audits. It may not be just a financial audit. And I would always ask for clarity on that situation is would they do a document or a physical audit, or would they do a financial audit, or will they do an ethics audit? Many of us who are parts of quasi-government nonprofits have to do ethics training. And if there is an issue where something is a question, they will come in and audit to see that your boards have taken their training, or they do have documents in their board materials that address the issues of ethics and the best practices for that organization and that body. Ethics training sometimes for board members are a difficult issue to cross because they don't want to think about those things. But we don't want to see our name in 6-inch headlines either. If you can't afford an audit, and many small organizations, many community groups simply don't have $1,500, $3,000, $6,000 to do an audit based on the size of your organization. And CPAs and financial organizations are just like the rest of us. They like to have lunch. They like to have homes. And so they charge healthy prices for it. I would never work as an auditor. As obsessive compulsive as I am sometimes, the idea of trying to make every penny move where it's got to be, track every dime, track every receipt, to do an audit is a nightmare for me personally. But I always want to sit with a funder and ask them exactly what do you mean when you say you'd like an audit to be included in the grant application, or you'd like an audit at the end of the program. They may be able to allow you to do your financial statements if they have been verified by a third party and not an audit. They may accept that you post your public information online where it is visible and accessible to everyone. Many organizations now take the step of putting their financial reports quarterly online, that if you wish to see them, they are there. What a funder is looking for is clarity and transparency in the money line. They want to know their 15 cents made 30 cents difference, impact, change on their issue. They don't want to know that you needed it to turn the lights on today. But you've got to satisfy what they need, and so they will continue to give you money. The best way to deal with an audit is to make sure that you've had a great open line of communication with your funder and literally be on time or ahead of schedule with everything. That helps them understand that you have integrity and you have credibility. You may not have expendable funds for an audit because some grant applications say will not pay for an audit. But be on time with everything, have everything in advance, and have an open conversation about them. If there are problems with a program or a grant and some things financially didn't work the way you wanted, before you go on and make just a line item change in a budget, make sure your funder knows that you need to do a line item change because on the back end, it looks like you've been trying to move things around to cover something sometimes. We mentioned the continuity of operations plan, and you heard me talk about the portable hard drive. I think I have 3 of them up here. They can be your best friend. They're no bigger than an iPhone, and they will help you understand what exactly is important. Many organizations use them to simply capture all their financial data. Some of them use them to capture all the HR data, but these grab and go systems will keep you alive if you have to move quickly for your organization. If you noticed how many things were on the document retention list of permanent things, that is where you have them digitized, that's where you have them scanned, and you have them placed. One of the things that I always suggest that people put in their continuity of operations plans is orders of succession. If the executive director is not available, who is the next signature on the check? If the the program manager is not available, who is the bench warmer that will step in and take that place? Also, one of the important things to have in your continuity of operations is delegations of authority. Many of our organizations post-Katrina did not have board meetings for 2 years, 2.5, 3 years. And they were a little busy, so it was okay. They kept moving, they kept serving the public, they kept serving the community. But they had to go back in and put in place ways to operate without literally being able to be in sight of each other or in touch of each other. One of the things we've done with a lot of organizations is in their bylaws have a line that says, in case of emergency, the board can operate under whatever electronic means necessary, like we are today, or conference calls. They can communicate by emails, but it becomes a possibility within the organization that they do not simply all have to be sitting in front of each other for a board to function, to operate. Katrina was a great opportunity for a lot of us to learn how to be better and stronger organizations and delegate authority and be able to say, okay, 1 board member's in Atlanta, 1 board member's in Houston, 1 board member's in Chicago, but we're going to keep this moving because the community needs it. Be sure you have these kind of pieces laid out. Make sure the board knows that they're there and the board knows how they're activated and when they're activated. When you have continuity plans, make sure that they include how you communicate with each other, in terms of knowing everybody's cell phone numbers, IM tags, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, all of the ways that you possibly can get somebody needs to be noted in there. And many times our HR departments put together documents just like that that says, when you're hired, please list all of these pieces. Make sure, one of the recommendations we talk about with operations is to back up your website, particularly if you use it to store essential information on a ghosted site or in a cloud, so that no matter where you are, you can operate through the web, especially if you're using voice over internet protocol for phones or for printers. Having that capacity will allow you to continue to work wherever you are. One of the things at the bottom, you'll see where it says, and that's one of the mice from the story, train, test, reevaluate, revise. Smell the cheese to make sure it's still fresh, is the line that goes with that. If we don't look at the continuity plans and they become another book on the shelf along with strategic planning, fundraising, development notebooks, all of those plans, and our continuity of operations plan is just there with it, it's not worth the trouble of having gone to do it. The continuity of operations plan will allow you to continue to win grants even if your organization cannot exist physically in the spot in the shape it was originally. We're getting ready to be finished. One of the things that I like to do is to give y'all a few minutes, and I'm going to tell Ted if he wants to have some folks come up, they can ask some questions. I always learn a tremendous amount of things from the folks who are on webinars with me, and that's how I keep helping people win grants. It is essential. We cannot live and die by grants. They have to be a part of what we do. But if we learn to talk to each other and share and say, this one isn't for me, but maybe it's for you, we all become richer in the end, and that's always my goal. Thank you. Ted, you still there? Ted's got his mic on. There he goes.
I'm still here, and thank you so much, Laura. This has been a lot of great information on how to deal with after the award letter arrives. I do want to invite the audience to share questions and comments with us. If you have specific questions about this process, please go ahead and chat those in the chat box in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. we have a little bit of time left, and we can see if we can address some of those.
And some of your experiences will help the rest of us.
And I see some people are typing, so we'll see what comes up here.
And again, every grant and every document, whether it is a gift or a donation or a legacy or a bequest, has specific requirements, and you need to honor those literally to the letter, to the word, and making sure that you get the next set. I've known too many folks that thought they carried through and got everything done and then couldn't get back in line to continue a program. We need to make sure that those funders know that we need them. We need to say thank you appropriately. We don't need to overwhelm them with every email, but we need to remember to say thank you, and that's part of the management. Some of the comments are coming in slow, so I'll give us a little time, folks. It says multiple people are typing now. This has been really good, Ted. Thank you so much for the being able to do this in this format. I think it is a great opportunity for everybody.
Oh, thank you so much for this great presentation. This has been a lot of really good info, and it's a great way to close out this series. As people type, I will remind the audience that CE certificates for today's webinar will be available tomorrow. You'll be able to print those off yourself by logging into www.txla.org/CE. And we have a question from Ron. Have you written a book, or can you recommend a book that will help us build and organize paper files?
Well, you know, in all honesty, I'm a research creature, and that's why I like libraries, I guess. A lot of this is actually is in the format of a book. I worked till 4 this morning on part of it, but I'm trying to put some together things. I have a blog that I've been doing for a while on it that needs to be updated, just like everybody else. But we are trying to put some things together. One of the problems is to make sure that it is fresh and current. That's always a risk. But yeah, I'm going to make sure Ted gets the blog information so that y'all can follow it. And I always have resources. And if you'll notice at the end of the piece here today, you'll see that I have some resources listed at the end, and a couple of more books that'll help you with knowing where things are.
Okay.
There are also there are online electronic management systems that will help with some of this. And the last piece I had was from 2004, and that's why I didn't include it. But the Council for Foundations has done some research on what are the good online management systems. But again, I find them so expensive still, it's difficult for me to say bless them and go on. But you'll see these are some of the federal pieces about how things are questioned, incurred costs, and some of the big pieces for feds.
And we will include these slides with the recording of the audio video. You'll be able to download the slides separately so that you'll be able to get all of these resources.
And they should be able to see there's notes inside of them from what I've said today too, because I tend to speak a little quickly. So there's notes on there's presenter notes on some of the slides.
Okay.
Well, again, as we get closer to 3 o'clock, I want to say thank y'all so much, and I will make sure that we stay in good communication. I'll make sure that Ted gets the blog site and some of the other things, because a lot of times what I do is a lot of resources and simply say, this is not for the client I have. Is there anybody else out there that is interested in it? The piece I did say about the Toyota Family Foundation, the Toyota Foundation Family Literacy Grant is accurate. It is up, and it is closing on June 24th. If any of you are interested, please Google that up. They work with family literacy, which will impact many of you. And it is a good award. It's not a 15-cent award.
Question from Ron on your email address. Is that
net? Right. It's NET, bellsouth.net, yes. And I answer emails all hours and that stuff. I'm on Facebook under Laura Browning, and I'm on LinkedIn under Laura Browning, and there's Crochet in there, which is an old name. But yeah, I answer emails all hours of the night sometimes. And I'll be glad to help anybody. I mean, one of the things we do with my group is that we do what we call red line reviews of grants. Based on my experience, if you can get it into me quick enough, I can get it back to you in usually a day or two and say, you might want to go back over this, you might want to look at this again. And we can do that with through a contractual agreement or something else, and swap things around to maybe I can help some folks. If you have a grant that's up and ready and you want it reviewed real quick, sometimes I can help. One of the pieces I do with TANO is a ultimate grant writing series on grant writing, where we do a lot of work on researching, writing, bringing the writing up to what I call the Barnes and Noble version of it, where literally it's going to jump off the shelf and say, "Give me money," because in some cases you're competing with people like me who are simply paid to write grants, and you have other things to do in your world. But we'd be glad to help you if we can. Sure, tell Ron I'm going to put it right back.
Okay, we'll head right back to the contact information.
Yeah, it's net. There we go. Oh, the T fell off on somewhere.
Oh, I see.
And I'll go ahead and say it. My cell phone number is 985-804-3583. And the email is lbcconsultant202@bellsouth.net. Thank you.
And thanks so much. And we will be sharing these slides and the contact information and the documents and sites that she's talked about just as soon as we can. I do want to point out for those of you who will be sharing this with others that if they will be watching the video recording, and again, this does not apply to any of you right now, this is only for people who watch the recording later. If they would like to get CE credit, then just please send correct answers to the following questions to me at this web address, and we will get them approval for a CE certificate. Again, if you're watching the live recording, you do not need to do these questions. This is only for people who would do this later. Name one component of your document management system for grants. Name one of the 2 policies recommended as part of the document management system, and name one type of audit mentioned in the program.
You're going to make me think I'm teaching again. I spent 26 years in education and had a wonderful time.
Well, clearly, as you can tell by the comments from the audience, Ron says you've put the fear of God in him about managing paperwork and electronic records. The audience is taking this to heart.
He's going to be a winner. He's going to be so much better at this. The others should be afraid of him. That's going to be the catch.
Well, thank you so much, Laura. This has been great. Thank you all for attending today. We'll get the recording posted just as quick as we can. And also, everyone have a good weekend. And we'll talk to you at the